was stretched out on my living room couch that afternoon, half drowsing in the warmth of the fading day. A forgotten cup of chamomile sat cooling on the end table, and the old wooden fan above me hummed its familiar lullaby. There's a certain magic in those quiet hours after the midday meal, a stolen slice of stillness in a week that usually rushes by. My home tends toward silence, the kind that lets your mind wander freely, uninterrupted. Until that afternoon when a gentle tap came at the door. It was one of those tentative, uncertain knocks, the kind that makes you pause and wonder who might be waiting on the other side. I hadn't been expecting anyone, certainly not at that hour. My first guess was the delivery driver, or perhaps a neighbor borrowing sugar, but when I pulled the door open, I found Daniel standing there, leaning casually against his mountain bike, like he'd just finished a long journey. Daniel is my neighbor's son, somewhere in his late 20s, always carrying that easy grin that could soften even the most guarded soul. But he's never been the type to stop for lengthy chats. "Sorry if I'm interrupting," he said, his voice carrying a slight tremor, something I couldn't quite identify weaving through his words. "I was hoping to ask you something." I waved him inside, my curiosity immediately sparked. Usually Daniel just offered a quick wave from the sidewalk before cycling away. This hesitation, this careful choosing of words before speaking, made me wonder if something was troubling him. He stepped through the threshold, bringing with him the faint scent of fresh-cut lawn and the honest sweat of his ride. The atmosphere in the room shifted somehow, charged with a quiet intensity that wasn't uncomfortable, just different. His eyes wandered the space as though seeing it anew, the afternoon glow catching the honey-colored drapes and the faded carpet beneath our feet. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, and I nodded toward the armchair by the window where sunlight pooled like melted amber across the hardwood. He settled into the cushion, hands resting loosely on his thighs, and for a stretched moment neither of us made a sound. I felt a strange blend of anticipation and worry, a flutter somewhere deep that I couldn't quite name. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to know, I've always looked up to you," he said, and I felt my eyes widen. That simple statement landed like a stone dropped into calm water, sending ripples through my thoughts. Looked up to me? Daniel, my neighbor's boy. Someone I'd watched transform from a shy child into this thoughtful young man now sitting quietly before me. What could he possibly mean? "I mean, you're resilient and compassionate, and I've noticed how you navigate everything. Life, responsibilities, relationships. It's inspiring," he continued, his voice fading slightly, uncertain but genuine. There was no calculated charm in his words, no hidden agenda lurking behind his gaze, just truth, unfiltered and surprising. For a heartbeat, I found myself speechless. I've always considered myself sensible, even guarded, the sort who keeps feelings neatly folded away. But hearing those words in that golden afternoon light, something stirred within me. A warmth, a recognition that someone had truly noticed me. Not just the exterior, but the deeper layers of who I am. "Thank you," I finally murmured, startling even myself with how genuinely touched I felt. That really means something." We remained there for a while, the room heavy with sunshine and comfortable silence. No hurry, no expectations, just a quiet acknowledgement of a moment neither of us had planned, but both somehow needed. And as Daniel relaxed back into the chair, a small grin pulling at his lips, I understood that this afternoon had taken an unexpected turn. It wasn't merely a knock at my door. It was an opening, a gentle invitation toward a connection I hadn't known I was ready for after that RST stretch of silence. I offered Daniel a cup of herbal tea. It seemed like a small ceremony, the kind that allows conversations room to unfold, a bridge between acquaintances and something closer. He accepted with a soft thank you and sipped slowly, as if the rising steam carried more than warmth, perhaps courage too. We began with trivial things, the changing seasons, the flower beds behind the house, how the light filled the living room at this particular hour. Daniel appeared more at ease now, his posture relaxing just slightly. And then, almost without warning, the conversation deepened. "You know," he said, voice gentler now, "I've always felt like an outsider around here. But you've always seemed different. Welcoming but not in a way that overwhelms. Calm but grounded. I've always respected that." I smiled, feeling a touch self-conscious, yet genuinely moved. Most people notice the obvious things. My garden, my schedules, the routines I kept. Daniel wasn't speaking about any of that. He was speaking about me, the soul behind the walls and windows, and that distinction mattered. Daniel, I said carefully, weighing each word. It's unusual for someone to perceive another person that clearly, especially someone young recognizing, well, someone with more years behind them. I laughed gently, the sound floating through the room. Thank you for sharing that. He shifted in his seat, pausing briefly before meeting my eyes directly. I didn't want to seem strange or out of line, he admitted. I needed to say it. I didn't realize until recently how much I wanted to. I felt an unexpected flutter somewhere in my chest, a blend of empathy, interest, and that undeniable spark of human connection. It wasn't about the gap in our ages or any particular expectation. It was about sincerity, about feeling truly witnessed in a way that counts. We began revealing more about ourselves, the kinds of things rarely shared with casual neighbors. I told him about the struggles of raising my children, juggling career and home life, the small triumphs that often go unnoticed. He listened attentively, leaning forward as though absorbing every syllable, nodding at moments that seemed to resonate deeply. Then he shared his own story, the weight of professional demands, the isolation of relocating from the city where he'd grown up, the times when he felt like no one truly understood him. His voice carried a rawness I hadn't anticipated, so different from the assured, friendly young man I'd waved to across the street countless times. There was a pause, a shared breath between us, as the amber afternoon gradually dimmed toward dusk. In that stillness, I recognized how precious it is to connect this way, to have a conversation rooted in the heart rather than the surface. I feel like I can really talk to you, he said softly, almost testing the words, like I can actually be myself. I nodded, offering a warm smile. And I feel the same, Daniel. It's refreshing, isn't it, to be heard without needing to over-explain. He smiled back, and it wasn't the casual expression of a neighbor's kid. It was a smile carrying gratitude, faith, and something tenderly unspoken between us. In that instant, I realized this encounter, this unannounced visit, had shifted something within us both. The sun disappeared behind the tree line, stretching long shadows across the living room floor. We didn't speak for a while, simply existing together in the hush, sharing the solace of presence. I felt a warmth I hadn't expected from someone near my own children's age. And yet, it was entirely organic, entirely authentic. Daniel's visit, which had started as a casual knock, had become a gateway into something I hadn't foreseen, an emotional intimacy built on honesty, mutual respect, and the subtle wonder of discovering someone who truly perceives you. I watched him eventually rise, preparing to go, and I realized I was already anticipating our next conversation, to explore this bond in ways that felt secure and sincere. That evening left me with a lingering reflection. Sometimes the most surprising knocks on your door can unlock the deepest chambers of your heart. Several days drifted by after Daniel's visit, but I couldn't release the memory of that afternoon from my thoughts. It was peculiar, like a thread had been tugged, and now part of me waited silently, hoping he might return. I told myself it was simple curiosity, or perhaps the solitude talking, but the reality was more layered. There was a glow I hadn't experienced in ages, something fragile and vibrant, ignited by a single act of vulnerability. Then one late afternoon I heard that familiar, tentative knock again. My pulse quickened in a way that caught me off guard, and I found myself smiling before I even reached the handle. Daniel stood there, bicycle propped against the railing, a gentle awkwardness in his stance that only made him more endearing. "Hey," he said, voice softer this time, almost anxious. "I was wondering, if you're not busy, maybe we could chat again." I stepped back, welcoming him in, noticing how the waning light traced soft golden lines across his features. Something felt different in the atmosphere this time. He seemed more exposed, and in response, I felt both protective and receptive in ways I hadn't predicted. We found our places in the living room once more, and for a stretch we said nothing, allowing the quiet to settle naturally. Then he turned toward me, and I could glimpse the burden he'd been shouldering behind his eyes. "I've been replaying what I said last time," he started cautiously, "and I don't know how to put it exactly, but I feel like I've found someone who actually gets me, even just a little, and I'm terrified of ruining that." I reached out, resting my hand gently on his. "Daniel, none of this needs to be flawless. It's simply two people being real with each other. That's more than enough." His shoulders loosened, a quiet exhale escaping as though he'd been holding his breath for days. And then, gradually, the conversation ventured deeper, moving past admiration and curiosity into something more personal. We discussed our anxieties, our regrets, our quiet ambitions. I recounted memories from my younger days, the missteps that molded me, the wisdom I still carry. He absorbed every word. And when his turn came, he revealed things I'd never known. The small pockets of loneliness, the expectation to always appear unshakable, the longing for someone to simply accept him without criticism. There was a closeness to our exchange that neither of us manufactured. It blossomed naturally. It wasn't about anything physical. It was about feeling secure enough to be truly exposed, genuinely perceived by another soul. And yet, I sensed a subtle current, a magnetic pull suspended in the air. Every glance, every slight movement seemed magnified in the golden radiance filling the space. At one moment he reached for my hand again, hesitating, as though requesting permission. I didn't withdraw. Instead, I offered a small, reassuring squeeze. That single gesture conveyed everything language couldn't: the recognition of our bond, the mutual trust, the unspoken consent. We remained like that for a long stretch, hands lightly intertwined, eyes meeting in quiet comprehension. The sun had dipped further, bathing the walls in deep copper tones, and I felt a rush of thankfulness for the transparency, for the shared openness, for the unexpected richness of this relationship. When he finally rose to leave, he lingered at the threshold. "Thank you," he said plainly, "for listening, for being present. It means more than words can capture." I smiled, feeling a gentle ache of affection in my chest. "And thank you, Daniel, for trusting me." As I shut the door behind him, I leaned against it momentarily, contemplating how peculiar and marvelous life could be. A simple knock, a quiet admission. And suddenly the world felt fuller, more textured, more vivid. I understood that this connection, unexpected, mutual, and profoundly emotional, wasn't merely about him or me. It was about realizing that even at this chapter of existence, we could still be noticed, still be comprehended, and still be moved by another person in ways we never imagined. I drifted back to the sofa, allowing the stillness to wrap around me, sensing both growth and expectation. The evening sky outside was shifting into gentle shades of rose and violet, and I recognized I was prepared to discover where this relationship might lead, not from impulse, but from wonder, confidence, and the readiness to embrace new beginnings. Following that evening with Daniel, I detected a subtle transformation within myself. Life had always unfolded as a sequence of habits, modest pleasures, and familiar patterns. But now there was a fresh awareness, a quiet thrill woven into the mundane. I caught myself looking forward to our exchanges, to that gentle tap signifying something more than just a casual drop-by. A week later, he appeared again. This time there was a lightness about him, a calm assurance that emerged from knowing he'd been accepted. We settled into the living room, the late afternoon glow spilling over the carpet, and I noticed how effortless it had all become. Our discussions, our silences, our small tokens of faith. "I've been reflecting quite a bit," he said, voice tender yet certain, "on how uncommon it is to bond with someone this way, to feel acknowledged and embraced without needing to justify everything." I nodded, grasping exactly what he meant. "It's rare," I concurred, "and it's something you treasure carefully when it appears." There was a shared instant where words became unnecessary. I experienced a deep surge of appreciation, gratitude that life had delivered this unanticipated gift, that we'd been receptive enough to welcome it, that years and circumstances hadn't created barriers. We spoke of simpler subjects too: literature, neighborhood strolls, how the sunlight graces the garden in late afternoon. Yet beneath the everyday topics ran a current of understanding, an intimacy cultivated from mutual regard and truthfulness. It was evident that this connection wasn't transient. It was a gradual, careful unfurling, one demanding patience and tenderness. At one point, Daniel extended his hand across the coffee table, gently brushing my fingers. This time, the motion carried the weight of familiarity and confidence, not the hesitation of before. I smiled, allowing our hands to rest together, experiencing a comfort that transcended mere touch. It was affirmation, validation, and solace intertwined. "I never anticipated this," he murmured. "Not with you, not like this." "Neither did I confessed, the edges of my lips curving into a soft smile. "But I'm grateful it did." As nightfall settled, the room glowing in muted amber, I felt a wave of introspection wash over me. This bond, surprising, consensual, deeply heartfelt, had imparted something precious, that it's never too late to be witnessed, to be understood, to share yourself with someone authentically. And equally, it's never too late to recognize the bravery and sincerity of another human being. When he departed that night, I didn't experience the hollowness that sometimes trails goodbyes. Instead, I felt serene, complete, and quietly hopeful for tomorrow. Life, I grasped, still held wonders for me. Moments of joy, comfortable silences, and heartfelt exchanges that could stir the spirit. As I closed the door and rested against it, I gazed upward at the stars beginning to emerge over the peaceful street. The universe seemed broader somehow, more vivid, brimming with possibilities I hadn't envisioned. And in the stillness that followed, I understood that this modest knock on my door had transformed me, not in sweeping, dramatic fashion, but in the manner that genuinely counts, by unlocking my heart tea. Oh, kinship, reverence, and the surprising delight of being truly seen. I prepared myself a fresh cup of tea, sank into my beloved armchair, and allowed a peaceful smile to cross my face. Life had gently reminded me that even in the later passages, there remains space for revelation, for gentleness, and for those quiet, exquisite instances that imprint themselves forever on the soul. And for the first time in ages, I felt completely, wonderfully whole.